My name is Nora Hayes. I'm 33, and last night at my parents' 40th anniversary dinner, my little sister looked straight at my son and said, "We didn't order for him." My father added, "You should have packed him something." The waiter froze. Everyone else kept eating $100 steaks while my 8-year-old clutched a breadstick. I stood, smiled, and moved every unpaid order onto my father's bill. Then I ordered the ribeye for Eli. The room went silent. But what they didn't know was, this was only the beginning. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family. Because this story isn't just about a dinner gone wrong, it's about what happens when quiet loyalty turns into quiet war. Stay with me. Every secret they buried is about to surface. I grew up in a house where silence meant safety. My mother, Mary Ann, loved appearances, the polished family photos, the Sunday church smiles, the perfect daughters. But behind closed doors, everything tilted toward my little sister, Tessa. Even when we were kids, it was obvious who mattered more. I still remember one Thanksgiving when I was 8 and she was 4. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and butter. The whole house glowed from the oven light. Mom was basting the turkey, humming along to some old country song. I stood next to her, holding a bowl of mashed potatoes I'd spent half an hour mashing with my small hands. Tessa wandered in, still in her pajamas, hair messy, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Mom turned instantly. "Oh, sweetie, you look adorable. Want to lick the spoon?" She didn't even look at me. My arm ached from holding the heavy bowl, and when I set it down, Mom said, "Careful, Nora, you'll spill it." That was the pattern. I worked, Tessa received. Years later, at my high school graduation, I was the first in our family to earn honors. I scanned the bleachers, proud, desperate to spot them. They were there, Mom fixing Tessa's hair for photos, Dad waving to a friend, not me. When I walked off stage, diploma in hand, Mom smiled absently. "Don't forget to take a picture with your sister. She looks so cute in that dress." I swallowed my words. I'd learned early that silence kept peace. When I turned 20, I took a job at a shipping warehouse in Phoenix. Long hours, steady pay. Every month, I sent part of my check home. Tessa was still figuring herself out, switching between beauty school and boyfriends who didn't last. Mom said, "She's going through a phase." I was always the reliable one, the safety net. At 24, I met a man, fell in love, thought maybe I'd found balance. But the marriage collapsed before Eli turned 3. My husband left without a fight, and suddenly, I was a single mother working double shifts. When I called Mom to tell her, she sighed like I'd inconvenienced her. "Tessa's having such a hard time lately, Nora. Don't make this about you." I stopped expecting comfort. Still, I tried to keep family ties. Every holiday, I drove 2 hours to their house, gifts in hand, Eli asleep in the backseat. Each year, it felt colder. They'd talk about Tessa's career as a beauty influencer while I sat in the corner checking Eli's homework. I'd bring a bottle of wine, and Mom would hand it to Tessa saying, "Look what your sister got for us," as if I wasn't standing there. I didn't know it then, but every little dismissal was sharpening me. The first big favor started when Tessa called crying one night. Her voice was frantic. "Brandon's job got cut. We're behind on rent." I didn't even hesitate. "How much?" I asked. She said she'd pay me back in a month. I wired the money the next morning. A month later, she called again. "The landlord's being unreasonable. I just need help for one more month." That turned into $5,700 total. I have all the Venmo receipts, each one labeled rent, help, or utilities. When I gently ask, "When can you start paying me back?" she'd reply with a laughing emoji, and soon. Mom found out and praised Tessa. "You're such a good sister, Nora. Not everyone would be so generous." I said nothing, but inside I felt something small and bitter curling tight. The irony was, I was the one raising a kid alone, juggling work and bills. Yet somehow, I was the family ATM. Then came the emergencies, babysitting her boys so she could attend brand events, which later I learned were weekend getaways, covering half her credit card debt after she claimed identity theft, editing her sponsored posts because she didn't have time. Every favor ended the same way. "You're amazing. I don't know what I'd do without you." And then silence. I told myself I was doing it for peace, for Eli to have grandparents, for some kind of family normalcy. But deep down, I knew I was just enabling their version of love, transactional, lopsided, and always on their terms. One memory still stings. Christmas, 2 years ago. I bought Eli a small set of art supplies, his favorite. When we arrived, there was a mountain of gifts under the tree, all tagged to Tessa's kids. Eli had won a sweater 2 sizes too big. When he unwrapped it, Roy said, "You can grow into it." That night, after everyone went to bed, I caught Eli sitting by the window, tracing frost with his finger. He whispered, "Mom, did I do something wrong?" I couldn't answer. I just pulled him close and said, "No, baby, you did everything right." What I didn't know was that night would mark the last time I'd ever excuse them silently. By the time last summer rolled around, my relationship with Tessa was less sisterhood and more unpaid crisis management. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach tightened. "Hey, sis." Her messages always began, syrupy sweet. "Can you spot me just until Friday?" Friday never came. I started keeping records, not out of spite, but survival. Screenshots, receipts, timestamps. Somewhere between the 5th and 6th emergency, I realized she wasn't drowning. She was floating, because people like me kept throwing her life vests. Mom once said, "She just needs extra care, Nora. She's sensitive." I wanted to ask, sensitive to what? Consequences? Then came the night that changed everything. It was mid-July, Phoenix heat pressing against every window like wet cloth. I was cleaning out the garage, trying to make space for Eli's old bike, when I found a dusty box wedged behind holiday decorations. Inside, old photo albums, half-faded birthday cards, and one yellowed envelope labeled Roy Private. I froze. Roy, my father, wasn't the kind of man who left things unguarded. I should have put it away, but curiosity burned through guilt. The letter was handwritten, dated 22 years ago. My mom's cursive danced across the page. The first lines were harmless exhaustion after giving birth, sleepless nights, postpartum blur. But then it turned. She wrote about not wanting another child, about feeling trapped, about a mistake that almost cost her marriage. "I don't think I'll ever bond with this new baby," she wrote. "I'm too tired to pretend anymore. I just hope Roy never finds out the truth." My breath caught. I was born that year. The paper shook in my hands. My throat burned. I folded it carefully, slid it back in, but the words carved into me like acid. Suddenly, everything made sense: why Roy never looked me in the eye, why every success of mine was treated like obligation, why every failure of Tessa's was forgiven. I wasn't just unloved. I was unwanted. I didn't know it then, but this letter would become my lifeline and my weapon. In the weeks that followed, I moved through days like a ghost. Work, pick up Eli, make dinner, sleep. But something in me had hardened. When Tessa called again, crying about a brand deal gone wrong, I said no for the first time. Her silence on the other end was sharp. Then came the scoff. "Wow, someone's stingy lately." I hung up. The next day, Marianne called. "Nora, what's this about you refusing to help your sister?" I said quietly, "I've helped her for years, Mom." She sighed, the kind that dripped with judgment. "Family takes care of family." "Yeah," I said, "some of us more than others." From that moment, something invisible snapped. They stopped pretending. Thanksgiving came early that year. Marianne wanted a family dinner at her house. I knew it wasn't about gratitude. It was control. She seated Tessa beside Roy, me at the far end of the table, like the outsider at my own family's gathering. Halfway through dinner, Marianne raised her glass. To Tessa, who just hit 10,000 followers. Everyone clapped. Roy nodded proudly. Tessa preened. No one mentioned my promotion, that week, a job I'd worked 10 years for. When dessert came, Eli accidentally spilled some whipped cream on the tablecloth. Roy's voice sliced through the air. "Maybe if you'd raised him with some manners." I cut him off. He's 8. The table went still. Tessa looked amused. Marianne's smile faltered. I stood up, took Eli's hand, and said, "We're leaving." No one stopped me. That night, as I tucked Eli into bed, he whispered, "Grandma looked mad." "She's always mad," I said softly. "At you?" "At everything she can't control." I kissed his forehead and turned off the light. It would be months before the steakhouse dinner, but in hindsight, that night was rehearsal, the quiet before the storm. I spent the next few months setting small boundaries. I stopped answering Tessa's late-night calls. I redirected Mom's guilt trips. I focused on Eli and work. Peace felt foreign but good. Then, one Friday evening, I came home to find an envelope taped to my door. No return address. Inside was a printed photo of Tessa and her family, smiling at a luxury resort. The caption beneath, written in Marianne's handwriting, "Family always finds a way." It wasn't a message. It was a warning. I laughed a low, bitter sound and tossed it in the drawer next to the old letter I'd found. Two relics of the same disease, one born of guilt, one of manipulation. I didn't know it yet, but those two pieces of paper would one day decide everything. And when the Mesa Prime dinner came, when my father's voice cut through the air, "You should have packed him something," I realized it wasn't an insult. It was prophecy, because this time, I was done packing anything for them: my time, my money, or my silence. The night after the steakhouse dinner, I didn't sleep. The image replayed again and again: Tessa's smirk, Roy's careless voice, Eli's tiny fingers gripping that breadstick like it was armor. By morning, my phone was already glowing with missed calls. 12 from Mom, 5 from Tessa, 1 from Dad. I didn't answer. Not one. At 9 a.m., my inbox dinged. A new email. Subject line, "Disappointed." It was from Mom. "You humiliated your father on his anniversary. You made us all look cheap. I hope you're proud of yourself." That was it. "No, are you okay?" "No, why did you do it?" "Just blame." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then, I closed my laptop and went to make breakfast for Eli. He sat at the counter, swinging his legs, tracing circles in the cereal milk. He asked quietly, "Did I do something wrong last night?" I smiled, forced and tired. "No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong." That morning, I decided not to explain, not to defend, not anymore. By noon, the family group chat exploded: cousins, aunts, all reacting to Marianne's message. "We're so embarrassed." Nora caused a scene at the restaurant. Aunt Lydia was the only one who replied differently. "Funny. I thought standing up for your kid was something to be proud of." That single message was a lifeline, a reminder I wasn't crazy. But the storm was far from over. 2 days later, Roy showed up at my office unannounced. He walked right through the lobby like he owned the place, suit pressed, cologne sharp. I met him halfway, trying to keep my voice even. "Dad, what are you doing here?" He handed me a manila envelope. "That's the invoice for Mesa Prime. The private room was $1,000. You're responsible for half." I blinked. "Half? You're serious?" He crossed his arms. "You wanted to make a statement. Now pay for it." My coworkers glanced from their desks, pretending not to watch. My skin prickled with heat. "Get out," I said quietly. His face twitched. "Excuse me?" I said, "Get out." He dropped the envelope on the counter and left without another word. The doors hissed closed behind him, leaving the smell of his aftershave like a stain. That night, I opened the envelope. Inside, a printout of the invoice, highlighted $1,000. No note, no explanation, just control dressed as accounting. I didn't pay it. Instead, I printed my own stack: every Venmo transfer I'd sent Tessa over those 7 months. Each labeled "Rent Help." Total, $5,700. I stapled them together and mailed them to Marianne's address, with one sentence written in pen: "This is what responsibility looks like." The next morning, Tessa posted a vague book status. "Some people love to play the victim when they've been cruel all along. Grateful I was raised by real parents who taught me love, not pride." Within minutes, mutual friends flooded her comments with hearts and sympathy. I scrolled through them, numb. Then I saw one from Brandon. "Proud of you, babe." That one made me laugh. Bitterly. At work, my phone buzzed nonstop. Calls, texts, voicemails, half guilt, half rage. I ignored all of it. Then came a message from Aunt Lydia. "Keep everything. They're going to push harder before they stop." She was right. 3 nights later, a car idled across my driveway for 20 minutes. When I stepped outside, it sped off. The next morning, a note was taped to my mailbox. "Family doesn't turn on family." No signature. But the handwriting was familiar: Marianne's looping cursive. That was the moment I stopped wondering if I was overreacting. They weren't just angry. They were organizing. And I wasn't going to play defense anymore. That week, I began documenting everything. Call logs, messages, even drive-by visits. I made folders on my computer, labeled legal, receipts, and CPS just in case. It sounded paranoid then. It wouldn't for long. It was a Tuesday when the real damage came. I was folding Eli's laundry when the doorbell rang, 2 short knocks, firm, official. Through the peephole, 2 women stood on my porch in plain clothes, badges glinting. Miss Hayes. Yes? Child Protective Services. We received an anonymous report. For a second, the air just vanished. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. About what? I asked, though I already knew. They exchanged a glance. Concerns regarding your son being left alone, signs of neglect, possible emotional distress. My knees felt like sand. That's a lie, I said. We're not here to accuse, the older one said gently. We just need to check. They stepped inside, polite but clinical, scanning the living room like crime scene investigators. I watched them open the fridge, note the groceries, peek into Eli's room. His bed was neatly made, shelves lined with books, toys and bins. They smiled softly when they saw his drawings taped to the wall, bright planets, stick figures holding hands. One of them crouched beside him. Hi, Eli. What are you working on? He looked up from his coloring book, cautious but polite. Solar systems. She nodded. Do you like school? He shrugged. It's fine. My teacher says I help other kids when they get stuck. When they left, the younger one turned to me. Honestly, Miss Hayes, everything looks fine. We'll close the report as unfounded. Then she hesitated. But, you should know, these reports stay in the system. If there's another, it'll escalate automatically. After they drove off, I sat on the floor, surrounded by Eli's tiny shirts, shaking. Someone had tried to weaponize motherhood against me. That night, I called Aunt Lydia. My voice barely worked. They sent CPS, I whispered. She went silent, then said, That's the warning shot. Honey, they want to scare you back into line. Her husband, Uncle Walt, came on the line. Document everything. And don't talk to them again without counsel. I wrote it down like gospel. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Jamie, the mom from Eli's school group. Hey, weird thing. Someone called the school office last week asking questions about you. Claimed to be a concerned relative. Sounded older. I didn't need a name. I already knew whose voice she'd heard. That evening, I walked into my garage, my quiet place, and looked at the shelf where I'd kept that yellowed letter. It wasn't just guilt anymore. It was motive. A week passed with silence. Then a new storm hit, this time online. Tessa posted another Facebook status, longer this time, paired with a photo of her kids hugging Marianne. The caption read, Family is everything, even when some people forget what that means. It had been 10 days since the dinner, and somehow, she still needed a stage. I didn't comment. I didn't share. I didn't defend. But I noticed something in the photo's reflection, the corner of Marianne's living room. Her Wi-Fi router blinking faintly on a small table. And suddenly, I remembered Jamie's warning about the anonymous CPS call. Sounded older. A thought took root. That night, I called Jamie again. Do you still have that tech friend you mentioned? The one who works in social media moderation? Yeah. Why? I just need to trace something. She didn't ask questions. Within hours, her friend confirmed what I suspected. The anonymous tip to CPS had been submitted from a residential IP address in Phoenix, specifically the guest Wi-Fi network of Marianne and Roy Hayes. My own parents had reported me to Child Protective Services. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at the walls, until Eli walked in holding his science project. Mom, you okay? I smiled, the kind of smile that hurts. Yeah, baby, I'm okay. The next day, I called a lawyer. Her name was Adriana Park, calm and razor-sharp. After listening, she said, This isn't family drama anymore. This is harassment. She leaned forward. We'll start with cease and desist letters. If they want war, we'll give them paperwork. That night, I started my own kind of filing. I labeled folders: financial support, CPS report, evidence, letter, digital proof, Wi-Fi IP. Each file was a wound cataloged. Each document, a memory stripped of emotion and turned into armor. The next morning, Brandon texted me for the first time in months. I'm sorry for what's been happening. I didn't know it would go this far. Then, hours later, if you ever need me to confirm anything, I will. It wasn't redemption, but it was a crack in their fortress. As I lay in bed that night, Eli asleep beside me, I thought about all the years I spent apologizing for existing. The dinners, the guilt, the endless rescues. And I realized something cold and clear. They didn't hate me because I failed them. They hated me because I stopped letting them fail me. The following week became a symphony of preparation, quiet, methodical, ruthless. While my parents and sisters spun their story across family threads and Facebook walls, I built something heavier, a wall of truth thick enough to bury them. Adriana called it Operation Paper Trail. Everything you've got, she said. Every message, every transaction, every lie, turn it into evidence. So I did. For 2 nights straight, after Eli went to bed, I sat at the dining table surrounded by folders, sticky notes, the soft hum of my printer spitting out ghosts of the past. Venmo receipts, check. Rent payment confirmations, check. Screenshots of texts, emails, social posts, all neatly labeled. On the 3rd night, I added something new to the pile. The old letter from Marianne. The one that had cracked my world in half. I slid it into a plastic sleeve, sealed it tight, and labeled it in black marker, motive. Then I opened my email and wrote to Adriana. If they try anything else, we use this. No more restraint. She replied within minutes. Understood. The next morning, the retaliation came, predictable and desperate. A certified letter arrived from my parents' attorney, thick paper, cold tone. They were filing for grandparent visitation rights, claiming I was denying them access out of spite and harming Eli's emotional well-being. I laughed, an ugly, humorless sound. They had ignored him for years, handed him bread like he was a stray, and now suddenly they cared about his emotional well-being? Adriana read the document over speakerphone. They don't have a case. Arizona law requires proof of a substantial relationship. They've got nothing, but they'll still drag me through it. Yes, she said, because this isn't legal. It's personal. That night, I sat on the couch, the house dark except for the flickering light from Eli's fish tank. I stared at the letter and realized how far they were willing to go, not just to punish me, but to control me. I picked up my phone and texted Aunt Lydia. They're suing for visitation. Her reply came fast. Then it's time to end this, Nora. Don't flinch. And I didn't. The next day, I started firing back. First, Adriana sent cease and desist letters to Marianne, Roy, and Tessa, each one outlining every instance of harassment, defamation, and the CPS false report. The tone was surgical. Further contact will result in immediate legal action. Then, I emailed Eli's school principal, attaching official documentation to add them to the restricted access list. Neither my parents nor Tessa would ever again be allowed to approach him on school grounds. By the weekend, I had the locks on my house changed. Not because I was afraid they'd come by, but because I wanted the symbolism of it. Every key they ever had was now useless. I spent Sunday in my garage, war room, pinning copies of every document on the corkboard above my workbench, photos, receipts, the letter, even a printout of the Wi-Fi trace Jamie's friend had sent me. Red strings connected each piece. If you'd walked in, you might have thought I'd lost my mind. But I'd never been more clear. That evening, I drove to Mesa Prime Steakhouse. Mr. Delgado, the manager, met me at the bar. I thought you might call, he said quietly. He handed me a flash drive. Security footage. The dinner. You'll want this. I stared at it. The tiny silver rectangle that held proof of everything, Tessa's words, Roy's tone. The moment the room froze. Why are you helping me? I asked. He shrugged. Because I watched it happen. And it didn't sit right. When I left, the air outside felt cleaner. At home, I watched the footage on my laptop. The screen flickered grainy black and white. There I was, sitting beside Eli, smiling through tension. Tessa leaning back, rolling her eyes. Roy's voice faint but clear. You should have packed him something. And then me standing, calm, composed. Cancel all pending orders, and move the bill to my father's tab. The silence that followed was deafening even on video. I pressed pause. For the first time, I saw it objectively, not as humiliation, but as liberation. That was the moment I'd stopped being the family scapegoat. Later that night, a new notification popped up on my phone, a Venmo transfer from Brandon Cole, $2,850. Half the rent I'd covered for Tessa. No note, no explanation, just the transaction. Then, a second message. I told her to stop. I've moved out. Do what you have to do. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. The fortress was cracking from the inside. The next morning, Adriana filed our official response to the visitation suit. We didn't just deny their claim. We attached every piece of evidence: financial records, screenshots, statements from Aunt Lydia and Uncle Walt, the CPS closure notice, and finally, the steakhouse footage. She ended it with a single line. This pattern of conduct demonstrates a sustained campaign of harassment, manipulation, and coercion against Miss Hayes. When she read it aloud, her voice was like steel. They wanted control, Nora. We're giving them consequence. 3 days later, I got a call from Adriana. They withdrew, she said. What? Your parents' attorney just dropped the case. Apparently, a certain church friend of your father's advised him to reconsider after reviewing the evidence. The silence that followed was heavy, sweet, and final. After the call, I sat at my dining table again, the same spot where I'd built my paper fortress, and looked at the letter one last time. Marianne's words stared back at me like an old curse. I don't think I'll ever bond with this new baby. I whispered. Then don't, and I slid it into the shredder. That night, Eli came home from school carrying a gold star sticker from Miss Patel. I helped with the class project today, he said proudly. I smiled, real this time. You always do, buddy. As he ran off, I looked out the window. For the first time, the house felt like ours. Not borrowed, not watched, just quiet. The war was over, but the silence that followed? It wasn't peace. It was power. Peace didn't come in a single moment. It crept in slowly like sunlight through a room that had been boarded up for years. For days, I woke expecting another call, another knock, another guilt-laced message. But none came. Instead, I received silence. And silence, I discovered, can be both sanctuary and weapon. Marianne didn't reach out. Roy didn't drive by. Even Tessa's Facebook went dark. For the first time in my life, my phone wasn't a grenade waiting to go off. But quiet never lasts long in families like ours. A week after the case was withdrawn, a small envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address, just my name in my mother's perfect cursive. Inside was a single photograph. Me standing at the steakhouse, mid-sentence, with Eli beside me looking up, proud. On the back, in blue ink, she'd written, "This is who you embarrassed." I didn't tear it up. I pinned it to my corkboard, right next to the printed Wi-Fi trace, the one that tied the anonymous CPS call to their guest network. The proof of their cruelty hanging beside their vanity. That was the first time I truly smiled without bitterness. I poured a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and began one final task. Not vengeance, just truth. I compiled everything: the rent records, the screenshots, the texts, the Facebook posts, even the letter before I'd shredded it. I wrote a clean, factual timeline of events. No anger, no accusation, just a story of patterns, receipts, and consequences. And then I sent it to my lawyer, Aunt Lydia, and, quietly, to one more address, Brandon Cole. He deserved to know what he'd been part of and what he'd escaped. He replied 2 days later. I get it now. She's already unraveling. Thank you for not burning it all down. But I wasn't done. Jamie called that weekend to tell me Tessa's influencer page had been suspended temporarily. Too many false reports linked back to her own IP. Karma moves fast, she joked. I didn't laugh. Karma had nothing to do with it. Truth did. That night, after Eli went to bed, I sat outside under the desert sky. The air smelled like rain and dust, soft thunder rolling over the horizon. They thought they'd buried me, I whispered. But they were just planting proof. Somewhere inside, I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Because secrets like ours don't die, they wait. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hit like and subscribe, because this story isn't over. Families like mine don't fade quietly. They regroup, they plot, they test the locks just to see if they still fit. But I'm not that silent daughter anymore. I have my son, my peace, and every receipt they ever left behind. So stay tuned, because the next time they knock on my door, they won't find forgiveness waiting. They'll find the truth, and I'll be ready.